company structure section of the demo is found under the headquarters icon. So we select the headquarters icon and we're then presented with the company structure. Sage X3 is a single instance business management solution, meaning that there's a single database, either SQL or Oracle, in which a whole host of companies and sites can be created. That means that the transactions are always done at the site level. The site is inherently linked to the company. And because we can have multiple companies within the database, that means we can do group reporting. So Sage X3 has got a concept called a folder, and a nice way of putting it is really just a section or a partition of the database that holds specific information, such as the live folder. So this is the production folder, the folder that the users are going to be processing live transactions in. We could have a development folder in which all custom developments are done before they are implemented into the live folder. There could be a training folder, so we would do the almost as is data. We'd have that sitting inside of the training folder and train the users in the training folder instead of training them in the live folder, because once transactions are created, you can't delete them. So it's a single database that can have multiple folders, and within each folder we can have multiple companies, multiple sites. We can transact in multiple languages, connect to multiple charts of account to cater for those countries that have got a statutory chart of account, yet they need to report to their head office in the corporate chart of accounts. Got multi-legislation, which means we can expand globally and connect the company that we're creating to the legislation of the company or of the country to ensure that that company processes reports in the format that the country requires, the tax structure that the country operates in, etc. There is a multi-currency, so we can have multiple exchange rates. We can have a spot rate, an average rate, a month-end rate. And then we're trading between companies that belong to the same, or branches that belong to the same company. Sage X3 takes care of the inter-site balancing entry automatically, and that means that we can run a trial balance down at branch level and not just at company level. And we'll see that shortly when we use this icon over here. And then when we're trading between branches or sites that belong to different companies, Sage X3 takes care of the intercompany balancing entry automatically, and we'll see how it does that inside the setup up here. So what does this mean? If we're transferring stock from that branch to that branch, we're going to credit inventory there, we're going to debit inventory over there, but the balancing entries is a debit to intercompany for this branch and a credit to intercompany for this branch, which ensures that we've got a balanced trial balance in each entity. So let's go have a look at the group reporting. What we're seeing over here is a grouping, so we can do a company grouping or a site grouping. We've got a company grouping over here, which says that we have one company today, and that company has got multiple branches. As we expand and we open up more companies, what we're able to do is link the new company to this group, and we can see the pyramid or the hierarchy change. So there's our group reporting, the two entities and the branches that belong to those entities. And we can start building and building and building and expanding, not just from company to company, but also across different geographies. And as we're adding more companies to the system with more sites, the pyramid starts to expand. We go back to the grouping tab over here. What we'll see is that we've linked two companies to a group code called ZACGP. The companies have got their connected sites, so this is where the transactions take place. And what that allows us to do is run group reporting. So if we open up the trial balance, for example, account balance inquiry, we can run it at company level as well as at branch level, which means that the trial balance is kept in balance at a site level and not just as a company level. So what that means is when you hit the search button, these values that we're seeing in the trial balance relate to this site in this company. And we can switch to another site, ZA12. This is the trial balance for that site in that company. And what we can also do is run it for another company, for that company's sites or for all sites. So if we leave the site field open, that means we're running all site trial balances for that particular company. But because we've linked company ZA10 and ZA20 to a group, what we're also able to do is run the trial balance at group level, which means it aggregates the two trial balances from ZA10 and ZA20 and presents us with an aggregated trial balance for the group. Intercompany mapping. To facilitate the auto posting of the intercompany accounts, we use the screen over here. Intercompany account mapping. And what this says is that when we're trading from a source company ZA10 with a target company ZA20, the source company will use these intercompany accounts and the target company will use those intercompany accounts. And that means that the trial balances are maintained or kept in balance at company level using these intercompany accounts. Intercompany parameters allows us to define automatic creation of transactions. So what that means is when we're doing an inter-site entry, so we are creating a purchase order in this site, and this particular site code ZA12 is the supplier that we use on the purchase order. What that means is that when we create that purchase order, it automatically creates the sales order in this site, in this company, which we will use to ship against. So we'll ship the goods that this company is ordering against the sales order, and then that company, that site, would receive the goods on that purchase order. And all we're doing here is just automating the creation of those inter-site and intercompany transactions. Firstly, to reduce the administrative overhead on the staff, and secondly, just to ensure that that transaction is actually created on the other side. If we have a look at the intercompany, we're saying that when we create a sales order in this branch on this company, and we use this branch code over here as the actual customer, what the system will do is create a supplier invoice in that branch in that company, which we'll use to pay that sales invoice over there. So we've discussed single database, group reporting, multi-company, multi-site, intercompany and inter-site balancing entries. We've spoken briefly about legislation, so what we'll do is jump into a company. We can see there immediately that when we create the company record, we're linking a legislation to that company, which means that Sage X3 takes care of the following legislations out of the box. Should there be legislations that are not listed over here, there are business partners in country that have developed legislation. So for example, Singapore, there's a business partner in Singapore that owns the Singapore legislation. That business partner is responsible for keeping that legislation up to date. And in a multi-country deal, should we require legislation that's not part of this list, we'll contact the business partner in country and purchase the legislation from them. Multi-language, if we switch the language, we can actually start to see X3 in Arabic. That means just switch the whole screen, left to right to left. So everything that was on the left list is now on the right list, and everything that was on the right list is now on the left list. So we need to figure our way back out of here. So multi-company, multi-legislation, multi-language, multi-currency, multi-branch, multi-legislation. All the multis that are required to expand globally are present inside of the single database with Sage X3. Sage X3 is a true multi-currency BMS. That means that we can have 3 transactions or 3 currencies per transaction. So this is the exchange rate table. This exchange rate table can be updated manually or automatically. So what we can do is subscribe to Awanda, for example. Awanda would publish their rates. That CSV file will be placed on a folder on the server, And Sage X3 can be set up to poll that server every so often, and as soon as it finds a CSV file, import it using the import templates to update this table automatically. You'll notice that we've got multiple exchange rate types. There's daily rate, which is the spot rate, the monthly rate, so for those companies where corporate prescribes the monthly rate, where all transactions are valued at that monthly rate. There's the average rate for foreign exchange revaluations at month end, and then a custom doc file exchange rate to add anything that's not listed in those above rate types. If we have a look at the types of transactions that we can use for multi-currency, what we'll see over here, if we scroll down to customer receipts, if you have a look at this transaction, it's a transaction that's been created in a South African site. The invoice is a US dollar invoice, but it was paid from a euro bank account. So you can see over there that the bank is euro, $4,750, and the euro equivalent is 4,278.28. So inside a single transaction, we've got a South African company generating a US dollar invoice that is paid in euro, and that's true multi-currency. Analytical dimensions. Sage X3 doesn't have a structured chart of accounts. In other words, we don't have a long string of account dash cost center dash division dash region dash product line. In Sage X3 we have a single account. So for fuel expenditure, for example, there will be one GL account for fuel expenditure. Let's call it 790000. Every branch, every division, every region will post to that single fuel expense account. And what Sage X3 will do is it will look for the division code, the sales region, the cost center, the project, any of the dimensions that we tell this X3 to go look for. It will find those from the master files that are sitting inside of the transaction and then simply append them to the fuel expense account. That will then allow us to have a lean chart of accounts. So we've got one GL account for every nature of account, and then still be able to analyze the postings to that account by the various dimensions. So if we open up the ledger, what we'll see over here for this particular company, we've specified that this company will use 7 of the 9 dimensions. You'll see there's up to 9 dimension types. So dimension types, for example, these codes and descriptions you would create for yourself. The ones that we've created are div for division, cost center, sales region, brand, zone, product, and customer. That means that we are able to analyze all of our general ledger postings by division, by cost center, by region, by brand, by zone, by product, and by customer. So if we go have a look at the default dimension type screen, what we're telling the system is that for all of the product codes, these are the types of dimensions that we'd like to assign to product codes in the system. For customers, these are the types of dimension types that we'd like to assign to customers, sales reps, etc. Once defined, we can go start setting up the dimension types. So for example, we've got sales region, SR for sales region, CCT for cost center, and then we start attaching the sales regions and the cost centers to the cost center and the cost center region types. And we do that in a dimension code screen. So you'll see that we've got dimension type customer assigned here. This allows us to do analytical reporting at a customer level. If we switch over to the cost center, we'll see that we've got our cost center type and all of the cost centers that we post transactions to. We then link those dimension codes and dimension types to the GL accounts. So for example, this is the multi-chart of accounts feature that you're seeing over here that allows us to switch charts. So we scroll down to the South African chart of accounts. We use the left list to do our filtering. And we can see over there, for our sales account, for example, analytical, these are all the dimension types that we'd like to post to the sales account in the GL. Once assigned, we can go into the actual transaction types themselves. So for example, if we go down to SOP for sales orders, sales order lines, we're telling the system that a sales order should have these dimension types that we can have populated. But we're telling the system to go and automatically fetch the cost center dimension code from a sales rep that's making the sale, the market from the customer that we're selling to, the product dimension from the actual product we're selling, the product line dimension from the product we're selling, the brand dimension from the product we're selling, the customer code from the customer we're selling to, the sales region from the site that's doing the sale. So we auto-populate the fields by telling Sage X3 where to go get the dimensions from, and then using role-based security, we actually restrict the users from changing those dimensions, or we simply hide those columns altogether. So the user that's capturing the sales order won't even know what dimensions are being posted to, because it's probably of no relevance to them anyway. So let's go have a look at a sales order. This is a simplified sales order entry screen. We're going to sell to tile warehouse. We're going to sell a red roof tile. We're going to sell 100 of them. And what you'll see has happened now is that the cost center has been automatically populated, the product dimension, the brand dimension, the sales region, the customer have all been populated, and I am unable to actually change them. So if they're of no relevance to the user, we can simply hide all of these columns, and therefore we've actually simplified the entry screen by probably only having about 3 or 4 columns that require the user's input. But what we can see over here is that those dimensions are automatically entered, populated, and they cannot be changed. The end result, once that sales order gets invoiced, it ends up in the general ledger. So if we have a look at a account by dimension inquiry, for this account, the sales account, for this branch, for this company, between those date ranges, with the search button, what we can see is that we've got postings to our sales account. But with the use of dimensions, if we scroll across, we can actually start analyzing where these sales are coming from. What are we selling? Who are we selling to? And you'll notice that we've got just the account. There's no dashes to link the sales region, the product line, the customer, etc. It's simply the account, and if we scroll across now, you'll see the cost center, the market, the product, the brand, and the sales region, and the customer, and the project. And that's how dimensions are displayed in the general ledger versus a structured GL where we have to have the same account, so a fuel expense account for every region and combination of product line and cost center and project. That means that we'll end up with a very large chart of accounts, and with dimensions we're able to trim that chart of accounts down by simply having one account and using the analytical dimensions that are simply appended to it in the inquiry screens and the reports. If we have a look down here, we'll start to see the dimensions. So if we look at the site, for example, you can see that there's the analytical dimension. The site, or the sales region for this site, is Johannesburg. If we look at the customer, we go to the financials tab, we can see that this market is wholesale, and there's the customer's code. If we go to product, for the product that we're selling, on the financials tab, we can see that we've got the product code, the product line, and the brand of product. And that's where Sage X3 retrieves the dimension codes from when doing the postings to the GL accounts.